of a teacher. If someone thinks you are wonderful, and you know you have power, you could say, do this and do that, and that person will do whatever you told them. That's a huge responsibility for a teacher. And this is why I think that when teachers take these rules and say, whatever, I'm not interested whether or not I could do this without any karmic result. I won't do it because I have respect for my tradition and my teacher, and I want to create a good example and a system which is safe and secure for all people who enter into it. So I think myself, I'm a little bit wary of teachers who demand absolute obedience and just to anesthetize or just to put to one side or normal ethical considerations because I'm special and don't think that way. And I feel for a healthy system, then out of compassion, then the teacher keeps all of the rules just like everybody else. And I think everybody will be a lot happier in that way. And it's also, if we're looking at teachers, and it's quite all right to look at teachers with a critical eye, I don't think that's bad karma. You're not being prejudiced and always aware that you only see some aspects, and some things can be quite mysterious and not obvious to an unenlightened eye for sure. But if there are certain, if a teacher is very manipulative and using his power for material gains, or encouraging you to make big donations, or makes a special fuss of rich people rather than ordinary people, and he enjoys all the luxuries and things, then we don't have to say, therefore, he's not enlightened, but we say, I don't agree with that. I don't think teachers should do that. I think that's all right. You see, where is the bad karma? You say, you can't be enlightened really if you're like that. You're just so materialistic. It's not, we're not drawing that conclusion because we don't know. We don't have that vision. But we can say, I really don't feel comfortable when teachers buy big cars, and I know a Thai monk who has his own aeroplane, and he says it's so that he can visit all his students around the world and visit them and give them teachings much more conveniently. And so there's always some good reason, but I don't find that inspiring at all. And it's the job of a monk also recognizing that we all have this tendency to create us and them. This is basic human instinct, isn't it? And to not say, you're my student and you shouldn't go somewhere else. And in fact, the Buddha said that this is a fault of a teacher who, if he encourages this kind of, that for students only to have faith in them and to be very sort of stingy and afraid or maybe my student goes off and visits that teacher and then leaves me forever. So this is where the teacher also is learning, not to identify with those kinds of feelings. So recognizing them as faults and weaknesses. So, if you're looking at teachers, particularly, what's the teacher's relationship to money? What's the teacher's relationship to power? What's the teacher's relationship to women? What's the teacher's relationship to other? Is it very critical and always putting down other teachers, and only I am teaching the true, profound Dhamma? He's quite a good teacher, but he doesn't really understand, and that's something to be wary of. And also, I think a really good sign is the relationship of the teacher to his own teacher or her own teacher. If you're always saying, really, I've gone far beyond my own teacher, and really it's and everything very, very self-centered, then I think that's something to be wary of. So I was talking about faith, and it's perfectly all right to use your common sense and intelligence and critical faculties to in your relationship with spiritual teachers. I think it's good for spiritual teachers that they have that kind of feedback from the lay. That's in fact one of the responsibilities of the lay Buddhists, to be giving feedback to authority figures. Just as in a democratic system, it's the job of ordinary people to be giving feedback to the politicians and the leaders. It's the same thing but at the same time, that balance, always maintaining that sense of respect and gratitude for what we receive from teachers. So not being very adversarial and critical, but being willing to say, I really don't understand this, can you explain? And you know, why do you do this? Why do you not do this?
I humbly thank you for the word of wisdom shared. So I'd like to ask the question, why is there a collision between religion and modernization, and we tend to be lost to it?
Sorry, I have to speak a bit slower, a bit louder.
Why is there a collision between religion and modernization, and why do we tend to be lost towards it?
The connection between religion and...
Why is there collision between religion and modernization?
Religion and modernization.
And we tend to be lost towards it.
Lost towards it. It's collision between religion and modernization, and why are we lost between the two?
Why are we lost between the two? Well, as I understand the Buddhist teaching is, you know, the understanding of the way things are, and the ability to recognize those things which are constructive and useful, and those things which are destructive and harmful. And so when we have this, in Buddhist religious terms, when we have this insight, then we have some criteria for deciding what kind. There's not just one kind of modernization, it's what kind of modernization do we want, and one which is compatible with our values and our culture. But I think that if we go back, you know, the beginning of the era of globalization, so-called, you know, there was so much, you know, optimism, you know, that the global village, you know, all boundaries are going to be dissolved, and we're all going to be all sort of harmonious, and it never worked. And in fact, in many cases, it was exact opposite. And you found that increased, we call balkanization, and people attaching very strongly to their ethnicity, and big countries breaking up into smaller countries and breaking up more and more, and everybody wanting to identify with one particular kind of group, or identifying with a religion, or so religion's the big one, obviously. And I think that my analysis of that is that the world is always changing, but the rate of change over the past few years has increased incredibly. And for most people it's very, very unsettling. All the things that they've taken for granted, now suddenly they're unstable. It's like an earthquake, you know, even the ground beneath your feet is shaking. That's it. It's very disturbing. And the family system is breaking up, and livelihoods are no longer guaranteed, and it's like everything's up for grabs. There's nothing solid anymore. And when people feel that their lives are threatened and not solid and not dependable anymore, then the usual response is you want to hold on to something very tight, and just this is safe now. And belief in a religious dogma is one of the favorite refuges for the disturbed, unsettled, insecure person. Otherwise, identification with my group, my ethnic group, my country, or even my football team, or whatever. But people want to have something. They say, this is it. This is what I can rely on. This doesn't change. Everything else may change, but this is stable. This is firm. And I think this is part of the reason for the growth of the fundamentalist movements throughout the world, and this increased attachment to ethnicity and so on and so forth. It's a reaction to the rapid, unpredictable changes in the world.
I don't know whether this mic is working, but I would like to... Maybe it's working now. I'm sure I'm loud enough. I'd like to thank you for the talk. It was very inspirational. And, you mentioned that people do make offering to the deities to gain unfair advantage, and you have construed that as a corruption. But on the other hand, what I think, and for which I would like to have your views, is that people actually fear that if they do not offer to the deities, they may fall sick. Something might happen to the families. Or so with that fear, actually, they make an offering.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, I was just trying to be a little bit provocative in what I was saying. But yes, I recognise that. But that's the use of fear, or the role of fear in manipulating people is a really important topic, isn't it, that we need to address in our societies, and we know that in most countries that if the government is very threatened or insecure or criticized, the easiest way out of that is to create an external enemy and say you should support the country if you're not patriotic. And if we don't all pull together, and then the enemy will come and destroy us and destroy our world and our religion. And so, as human beings, we're very prone to manipulation through fear, and to recognize how that works in all the different areas of our life. And I really sympathize with someone, because if you have a child that's ill, and you fear if you don't perform a certain ritual, that child may die. You can't say you don't have a second chance. If you say no, I won't do it, and the child does die, then you feel awful all of your life, wouldn't you? So this is something that kind of recognize, but at the same time, I think one of the services that academic institutions can perform in society is to be gathering statistics. Often all these kinds of discussions about this end up into whether or not you believe it and or not, and someone who doesn't believe is very skeptical, and somebody who does believe says you don't know and you're blind. But there is an example. There is a monastery in Thailand which is very powerful and very popular these days, and it's very controversial because, from my point of view, is a serious distortion of the Buddhist teachings. For instance, the concept of merit they've made into like merchandise. So basically, you can buy merit, and the idea is if you make an offering of 1,000 baht, you make so much merit. You make 10,000 baht, you make 10,000 units of merit. And so it's applying various kinds of management techniques and pyramid selling and all these kinds of things to propagation of Buddhism. And so it's basically telling people, if you offer so much money, everything's going to be wonderful in your life, and you're going to be successful in this life and in future lives. And this is incredibly popular in Thailand. So now you probably know we have this terrible flooding in Thailand. So I'm saying, why don't one of the universities send people out and do a statistical study of how many of the houses of people who are devotees of this monastery and those who are not, and to compare the flooding levels. And if we find that there's less flooding in the houses of people who offer huge sums of money to this monastery, we can say, yeah, there's something in that. But if there's not, and their flooding of the house is more a function of how high above sea level their house is, and as I suspect it may well be, then when these kinds of discussions come up, rather than just one side against the other side, you can say, well, why is that the case? If you're teaching religion on this level, that you offer a lot of money and then you're going to become rich, then you show me, is this true? Because what you happen if you have 100 people, you're always going to have some who are successful, and everybody talks about them, and they don't talk about all the others that weren't successful. And in Thailand, we have this thing where custom for many people, they go to listen to Dhamma talks and discourses in order to get lottery numbers. And some monks, they have this power, they can actually accurately predict lottery numbers, but it's not, it's not allowed to do it. But unfortunately, many people believe that all meditation monks can do this. And so when they think that because meditation monks are very compassionate, the way that they'll do this is like smuggle these numbers into their Dhamma discourses. So you have people going to listen and not absorbing the Dhamma, they're also waiting, and so somebody says, and the monk says, and the four noble truths, eightfold path, so, but, and so if you have 100 people, and they're all getting the numbers, it's quite likely one out of that 100 will win the lottery. This is an underground lottery where you just play 3 numbers, so it's quite easy to win. And so I've had people, Ajahn Jayasaro, thank you so much. That's 2 weeks in a row I've listened to your Dhamma course, and I won the lottery. Thank you so much. So it's the idea, if you have enough people, you're always going to have a small percentage of people that you can say, yeah, look there, Ajahn Jayasaro gives lottery numbers in his Dhamma talks, because so-and-so, he won so much money. Did you hear? He's bought himself a new car or something.
Okay, this mic is working better. Ajahn, I have a personal dilemma. I don't know where to begin also. But the thing is, I was saying, we have, as Bhutanese, and as Buddhists, of course, we've been brought up to be very hardworking, and like you were saying, we put in a lot of effort. And over the course of, not just my lifetime, but my parents' lifetime also, I think, and also, of course, with the developmental activities in Bhutan, we've reached, I think, positions of, like you were saying, we have lots of disposable income. In fact, it was very interesting that you should mention about the bag, because I looked at the book and I said, I'm carrying an expensive bag myself and feeling very guilty about it, But the thing is, we've reached, I speak for myself, because it's a personal dilemma. We've reached the stage, I would say, because of good fortune also. And a lot has to do with hard work, and suddenly we find ourselves in a position of, a little higher status, more economic, in a better economic position than a lot of people in the country. In fact, few members of the audience were also mentioning about the inequalities. And I find myself unfortunate to be on the other side, and it's a personal dilemma, because on the one hand you work hard, and you've been brought up to work hard, and success is supposed to be a reward of that hard work, and we find ourselves in that position now, and then suddenly it's almost like the whole world, or the whole, especially here in Bhutan, whole society is pointing fingers at you and saying, oh my God, we're the ones, who have too much. And it's, in a way we feel, I feel that I'm being marginalized, because I think as far as possible, we've tried to do the Buddhist thing. We give donations where it's due, we try to help, and till now we've kept very quiet about it. But I think I'm being very open here, because I want people to know that we do use our money wisely. We do give donations, we do help the poor, and to monasteries, to the poor people. We've started charitable organizations, and it's a personal dilemma for me, because on the one hand I'm a Buddhist and I'm a practicing Buddhist, and yes, I do enjoy carrying my Gucci bags and wearing my Gucci shoes, and but on the other hand, this is it's very confusing, and I was just wondering if you could throw some light,
The Buddha, I'm not aware of teachings when the Buddha criticized wealth per se. The Buddha said that the acquisition of wealth is a legitimate part of a lay Buddhist life, but that there are certain certain boundaries, that the wealth should be gained through honest effort and not through taking advantage of others and cheating and harming. And secondly, that the wealth that has been attained or gathered should be used well. Some of the strongest language we find in the Pali Canon used by the Buddha is criticism of misers, people who accumulate wealth and never put it to good use. And so the Buddha said that once you have accumulated a certain amount of wealth, you should try to make yourself happy, and you should try to help and increase the happiness of your family members and people in society at large, and also to support the religion that you profess. And then the last practice is not to be a slave of your wealth, and not to be attached to your wealth. And that's the most difficult one, of course. So, often we say, my car, my this, my that, but actually they possess us rather than we possess them. So, given those, the Buddha didn't criticize that at all. And in fact, with wealth, the opportunity to do good and to help others is magnified. And someone who uses their wealth well is praised by the Buddha. An example is Anathapindika. Anathapindika was one of the great lay disciples, and every morning he would go to the monastery and offer food to the monks, and then he would go home and he would open his house to all the poor people and the beggars. So these were his two acts of generosity every day, one to support the Sangha and one to help others. But at the same time, the Buddha recognized that it's all right to enjoy yourself, and you like nice clothes or nice handbag, that's all right. That's not evil or bad or anything to feel guilty about. As long as you're not going into debt, or that you don't have enough money to pay the bills or anything like that. It's it's not a big deal. As long as it's not just completely running your life. And I don't think there's. I think that if you have a society in which people want to be boasting about their wealth, then that's something obviously, and sort of rubbing it in other people's faces, like I've got this and you haven't, then that's not very good for society. But I think that when you have a culture in which the wealthy people try to be modest, and particularly in their visible displays of wealth, then I think that's workable. And in England, for all of the iniquities of the British class system, the one thing that I like about it, or I used to like about it, is the kind of the sloppiest and worst dressed people in England are the aristocrats, and that was just kind of like one aspect of British culture I really liked, when you're really wealthy, you don't have to show off anymore, you can just be a slob. As far as how you're perceived, this has come back to basic Buddhist teaching of the 8 worldly winds and praise and blame. And this is something that, as Buddhists, we really have to study and learn about, because it's a major cause of pain and distress in our lives. One of the key recollections here is, if you look in the Pali Canon, there's not one of the great enlightened beings that wasn't unfairly criticized at some time or another. The Buddha was a subject of the most awful slander at some times. There's Venerable Sariputta, Mahamoggallana, all the greatest teachers, they were misunderstood, misinterpreted, and their reputation was destroyed, for temporarily at least. And so I think that helps, that no matter who you are, I had this idea myself, and you can hold two ideas at the same time. I know this teaching that there's always some praise, but I had this idea, if I could just be an impeccable monk and keep all the rules impeccably and just do everything exactly the way my teacher taught, then how could people criticize me? And then I found, it wasn't the way things work. If you do good things, okay, what's going to happen in any kind of community? One, people are going to praise you too much because they want something for themselves. So they're going to flatter you. If you do good things or you're successful, you're going to have people flattering you can't trust. You're going to have people that praise you appropriately through a general recognition of the goodness and things you've done. There's another group of people who are going to be completely indifferent, they couldn't care less. There are other people who are going to say, you're not really good, you're just putting on a big show to impress other people, and actually you've got some secret agenda. And there are other people who are going to be jealous. So this, whatever kind of community you are, you're going to meet those 5 kinds of people. And there's no way you can manipulate conditions or live your life in such a way that you're going to be free of that. And sometimes you're praised for things that, not so praiseworthy, and the other side of the coin is you're criticized for things that are worthy of praise. So when we're talking about the deities and the devas and so on, one of the deva reflections, which I think is very helpful, is the Buddha says, you live a life in such a way that you are praised by the devas, praised by the deities. But if you think you're going to be praised by everyone in society, that's never going to happen. But then if you think, when the way that I live my life, the standards that I have and so on, if my spiritual teacher knew and he, would he criticize me or not? Not the sort of prejudiced man in the street or someone who's always willing to look on the black side, but you see, the person who you most respect and you most trust, and the person who has the most integrity, if they knew the truth, what would their reaction be? And if you can tell yourself, yes, my teacher, he would praise me for this, he would understand, and he would, and for my occasional lapses and weaknesses and indulgences, he would also feel compassion for me. You don't set the standard too high, because I think most religious traditions, and one of the things that's kind of toxic about them is this, you should be like this, and you shouldn't be like that. And then people just feel guilty all the time because I can't be the kind of person my religion tells me I should be, I should be so much better than this, I should be so much kinder, I shouldn't get angry, I shouldn't lose. Why shouldn't you? I mean, if the causes, the conditions are still there, it's going to happen. So, myself, I believe that guilt is a culturally conditioned mental state. It's not a natural state, and in fact, you may have heard this story. I've experienced it myself once with a senior Thai teacher, but one of the visits with the Dalai Lama to America, meeting many American Buddhists, and many of the American Buddhists are from Jewish backgrounds, and so the big question would come up, Your Holiness, how do we deal with guilt? And there's a crippling sense of guilt all the time, and His Holiness didn't understand the question. What do you mean? And so he had to really try to explain in a way that what we mean by guilt. And in the end, the Dalai Lama started to cry. He said, that's so sad that all these people in these countries feel like that, and I think if you're brought up in a Western cultural condition, you feel guilt is like a sort of a law of nature. It's just something that you're born with and saddled with forever. And I think it's very liberating to come to Asian culture or Buddhist culture where we don't have that concept of guilt. But what we do have is concept of shame. And shame is very different, because shame is a wisdom-based emotion. So the way that shame is explained in Buddhist sense is we reflect what is our role and our responsibility as a human being to our fellow human beings, as a mother, as a child, as a sister or a brother, as an employer. So all those conventional roles that we play, how do we feel would be the appropriate and the best way to behave? And that's a recollection in your mind, a perception in your mind. And then when you're about to act or speak in such a way that conflicts with that, there is a sense of conflict between those ideals that you've adopted and how you're about to behave. And so there's the cognitive aspect is a sense these things don't mix, they're incompatible. And as a result of that recognition, intellectual recognition, there's a feeling. And that feeling is shame. So there's a shrinking away from a certain act. That's shameful. I'm betraying my principles. And the difference with guilt, and the guilt the Buddha included in the list of defilements. Shame is considered a very positive emotion, one that is a foundation for spiritual growth. What guilt is, I did something bad, I am a bad person. I am bad because I did this. So it's me and mine, and you're taking ownership of this. It's not a recognition of the action, of the negative emotion as something which needs to be abandoned, but it's a judgment on me as a person. And so this, the Buddha said, is a mental habit and a defilement that we need to learn to let go of. So seeing that distinction between this intelligent shame and guilt is very important one. But the extent to which many of the educated class of people in Asia now are going to the West and being educated in Western education, then this guilt toxin is just spreading throughout Asia at the moment, and and people don't really even see it and recognize it very clearly.
Thank you very much for your wonderful deliberations. Well, I have a skeptic in my mind all the time. Basically, I'm also a Buddhist, but basically all religions show the path of righteousness.
All religions are
righteousness.
Righteous.
Yes, to be right, to practice right. Well, all religions shows us to do good. And Buddhism also, as per Buddha, it basically tells us to practice right speech, right efforts, right mindfulness, right thoughts and actions. So these are pragmatic. Basically what I want to say is on the practical side of things. These are practical. Like we do good efforts, like we project good actions, it will accumulate good merits. And accumulation of good merits will lead us to good and healthy living. So on the other side of the coin, like as I'm also doubtful about, is some people say that religion is symbolic. Everything sometimes it becomes ritualistic rather than being practical. And the world now is very pragmatic and practical because it's a scientific world. We believe and we trust in what we see and what we can touch and feel. But basically, in Buddhism also we have lots of rituals in order to purify ourselves, in order to defile ourselves, and in order to carry on our lives with good thoughts. Like many scriptures basically, in Buddhism, many scriptures basically relate about signs of mankind. It also tells about the signs of development of aeroplanes, vehicles. Basically in the scriptures, everything is there in Buddhism. But yet it is so, like some people say that it is so ritualistic and it is symbolic. I also, in my personal experiences, met some of the people who did so. So I would like to ask the Venerable that to get some say from your side to fill up the gaps in the doubts which I had just shared.
First of all, in terms of symbols and conventions and rituals, I think that part of our genius as human beings is that we can create concepts, and symbols and systems of abstract thought for various purposes. And so the fact that something is symbolic, it depends on for what purpose. In a couple of talks since I arrived in Bhutan, I've been talking about Buddha images and religious symbols, and pointing out that as a Buddhist education symbol, our goals are wisdom and compassion and purity and liberation. All these things are abstract, and even for like a religious professional, let's say like a monk, these are quite difficult to think about and to reflect upon. And so for a long time now, the great masters came up with this idea of creating physical objects which can be seen and which are tangible, which can remind us and can inspire us with those abstract ideas. So if you go to the West, one quite shocking thing, even for me, is you can go into houses and people have Buddha heads on their mantelpiece, or just as decorations in their house. And if you are, for myself, because I haven't lived in England since I was a schoolboy, I find shocking, even though I understand why. But if you ask people, you're not a Buddhist, and why do you have a Buddha head on your wall? And some people say, I don't know. All I know is if I look at it, I just feel calm. I just feel good. It's so nice when I get really stressed and anxious. I just look at my Buddha head and I feel good. So this, I think, for someone who's not even a Buddhist, how much more so for a Buddhist? So these are things that can be used in a very creative way. And religious traditions have long ago come across this idea of what today we call multimedia. And Bhutanese Buddhism is great on multimedia, with the sounds of the horns and the colours it's fantastic. For someone coming particularly from another culture, it's just wonderful. But in those kinds of symbolic rituals and representations, their role is not to provide some intellectual understanding of Buddhist doctrine. It is to stimulate certain emotions. To create religious emotion. It's the same like the cathedrals in Europe. There's the shape of the buildings, pointing up high, and the stained glass, and the statues, and the incense. All these things are there to create a certain kind of feeling, which they feel is conducive towards spiritual growth in that sense. So that's something about the role of so now, if somebody says, all you're doing is bowing down to a stone image or a graven image or a god or something, then we say, well, no, we're bowing to, we're prostrating before that which expresses our highest ideals in life. A comparison I was made. Let's say you're watching the television, and somebody said, how can you be so foolish and superstition? There's nobody in that box. There's nobody really there. There's nobody really speaking. All you're looking at is a pattern of colours and sounds coming out of a box. And you say, well, no, I'm not. This is a representation of something. And I can learn and I can derive enjoyment from a television. I don't have to believe that there's actually somebody, all those things are happening inside that little box on the wall. And it's the same with spiritual symbols. So let me talk about science. Okay, I think science has managed to promote itself very, very well, and we have this very exalted idea of science. But I think that as science is actually practiced, it doesn't really quite live up to its billing. There's so many examples of this. One thing I read about some years ago, scientific community depends very much on peer review, and so you have these very prestigious publications. And if you want your your scientific research to be recognized in the larger scientific, you need to be published in these journals, Nature and so on. So these scientists took a number of papers published in the most prestigious scientific journals, written by Nobel laureates and so on, and then reprinted them and then changed the name. And it was it'd be things like sort of Mr. Karma from Punaka Technical College or something like this, you know, and from places, obscure places in Africa and all over, and resubmitted these the very same texts, and in almost all cases they were rejected, even though the content was the same. And just a very simple point, that the name of the institution and the name of the person has a much larger role to play than is generally recognized. Now, a little subject closer to home, rebirth. People say, oh, you know, I like this. A lot of the Buddhist teachings, you know, are very practical, pragmatic, but I can't get this rebirth thing, you know, I'm a scientist and it's not scientific. But I would contend that the evidence in support of rebirth is far more telling than that which supports many scientific theories that are accepted in the wider scientific community. So why is rebirth considered not scientific? Now my theory here is that the scientific community there are two main power groups. One are theists, people who believe in eternal heaven and eternal hell after death, and the others are the materialists who believe that after we die there's nothing. And so if you're going to promote a scientific theory, it has to have the acceptance of at least one of those big power groups. And if you have a scientific theory of rebirth, the theists won't accept it because it conflicts with their religious ideas, and the materialists won't accept it because it counters their own ideas about what happens after death. So it has no champions, and so it's considered unscientific. And if you look at history of science, then at each juncture in science you have a certain amount of information there, which is conditioned by the technology you have. The more technology, the more information, the more data that you have. But it's not the case that given a body of data, there is only one hypothesis which fits the data exactly. You know, over and over again, you can have many different hypotheses, conflicting hypotheses, but which perfectly explain the data that you have. So the really interesting thing is, if you look at the history of sciences, why is in each period is this particular hypothesis accepted and the other one is rejected? On what grounds? And over again you find that the grounds are unscientific. They're cultural, religious, social criteria. So the idea there is this abstract thing called science, you know, that is separate from scientists and people's failings and jealousies and prejudices and so on, is not the case. If you look, you know, at the series, the number of the greatest scientists in the world that falsified their data because they were absolutely convinced that their theory was true, including people like Einstein, the evidence is there, and Einstein said at one point, you know, the idea that the scientific method is data, hypothesis, testing of hypothesis, and then proving of theories and so on. He says, no, the theory comes first, and then you try to make the data fit the theory. Some of the greatest scientific theories have come through visions and through meditative states. Sometimes with who is it? There's what's this? Tesla. You know a man called Tesla? I think he's Serbian or Croatian, and closely associated with Edison. He worked for Edison for some time, and his greatest discovery of alternate current electricity came to him when he was watching the sunset. He was just sort of relaxed, not in his laboratory, and looking out, and he just suddenly had this vision, and he ran off to his laboratory and wrote it down. And so there are all these kind of irrational basis for, some most important sign. And then if you look at Edison's relationship to Tesla, Edison couldn't bear the fact that Tesla had come up with a superior kind of electricity than he did, and he did everything he could in his power to blacken the reputation of Tesla, in the sense of giving talks and lectures and denigrating him in publications, the most horrible, nasty kind of character assassination from one of the greatest scientists the world has ever seen, because he was a rival and he was eclipsing him in a very important area of his life. There's just a few examples that, when we talk about science, remember, this is kind of just messy business of ordinary human beings, and it's not this kind of abstract, pristine kind of entity. We're in a scientific age. Are we really? I'm not so sure. Yeah.
A short question. Thank you for your talk. You mentioned a relation between emotions and faith.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Well, faith is a religious emotion, and let me say that in the 19th century, late 19th century, the revival of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, following hundreds of years of colonial influence, and the Portuguese, tried to wipe out Buddhism. The Dutch were much better. The British were a bit more subtle about it, but Buddhism was oppressed for a long time. The revival was really based upon the work of a number of Westerners, particularly Colonel Alcott from America, the Theosophists. And in the revival of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, the interpretation of Buddhism was scientific Buddhism. And the way that they took on the missionaries was, say, Christianity is this kind of irrational, blind belief, and we're Buddhists, we're rational, we don't have all that kind of stuff. So they just chose all the aspects of Buddhism that were most in line with their idea of what scientific meant. And this became a current within the Buddhist tradition. And when I was first practicing Buddhism, a number of people who came to become monks were this kind of scientific Buddhist tradition. We don't want all that kind of mystical stuff. We like this really pragmatic approach, and we don't like chanting, we don't like devotional practices, and we don't like ritual. That's not necessary. Let's just get down to the real essence. Let's talk about emptiness and conditioned genesis and all these kind of really meaty kind of topics, But what I found was that it becomes very kind of dry and desiccated kind of approach to spiritual development. And I don't think it works very well. Whereas the Buddhist training is one in which is a cultivation of emotion as well. It's not denigrating. You shouldn't have emotions. Emotions are bad. Emotions make you act badly and do stupid things. They're saying that these emotions need to be cultivated. And certain emotions are based upon a misperception, misunderstanding of the way things are, and the more you understand, the clearer you see those emotions start to fall away. But other emotions become stronger, and this faith's emotion becomes stronger and stronger through that effort to verify the objects of faith. Like I was saying, to repeat, the basic faith here is you can abandon the unwholesome, you can develop virtuous qualities, you can purify your mind, you can liberate yourself. So you are, day by day, you're putting that to the test. And as you find, yes, you are abandoning, you are developing, you are purifying, then your faith becomes stronger and stronger. To the extent that you're constantly saying, yes, oh, that's so true, the Buddha said that, now I understand what that means. So the more that you practice and the more that you try to to train your mind and your life according to those principles, the more confidence and the more faith you have in it, and it gives rise to a great deal of joy in life. The main positive emotions which are cultivated in Buddhist training are a group of 4 virtues, and are loving kindness and compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And the 4th one, I think, is the most unexpected, the idea that equanimity is an emotion, and is the most sublime emotion. We tend to confuse equanimity with indifference. But this equanimity of the Buddha, and this is a good case in which Buddha images express this teaching, is the Buddha is so calm and so equanimous, but his eyes are open. He's not equanimous because he's turning his back on human suffering. He's aware of human suffering, and yet he's so solid, and he's right there, and he's equanimous because he understands that things are this way because of all the causes and conditions that have led to them. So for a balanced training, there has to be that intellectual appreciation of Buddhist teachings. There is the cultivation of the positive emotions, faith and joy in the teachings, and these loving kindness and compassion, and the ability to appreciate and to derive happiness from the goodness and the successes of others, and finally this stability of mind, this equipoise or equanimity.
Thank you for the talk that we are fortunate to have this morning. Ever since I started studying Buddhist philosophy, I could really revere and understand most, but I'm stuck in many places and I have listed down. I just want to bring out the first one.
Yeah.
The first one in Dhammapada. I may not be able to correctly read the way it is, but in one place it is said that self is the goal of self. Now when I read that one, and when I go back to the core philosophy of not self, anatta, it's directly, not been able to comprehend between this philosophy of anatta, the anitya, anatta, and dukkha. There's 3 core philosophies. So what is said there, the self is the goal of self. What else could be the goal?
Yes.
Go further than that. So I'm stuck there in understanding. So is that self, what is there, the self is the goal, the first, the self, is it the Buddha nature that inherently present in us? So I'm stuck there.
Yes, yes. Well, the Dhammapada verse says that like the self is the refuge of self. And the self relies upon the self. There are a number of teachings in that vein in the Pali Canon, and the way to understand them is that the Buddha said that we need to adapt our language according to circumstance, and that we need to function in the world. We need to be able to use conventional terms. And as I said just now, the ability to create conventions is one of our greatest achievements as human beings. But the only problem is that we tend to identify with, or to give too much importance to, or we forget that the convention is a convention. Okay? But when you recognize a convention as a convention, then you're free to use that convention effectively. So, if we were going to communicate on the highest level, let's say you as a human being ultimately as a conditioned stream of mental and physical phenomena. Okay, we can say this is like an expression of the highest philosophy. But if I wanted you to come over here, you know, I say, hey you, conditioned stream of physical and mental phenomena, come over here, you know. It wouldn't work, would it? You'd think I was a bit crazy. And then all the other conditioned stream of mental and physical, is he talking to me? You know, because we're all. But it just makes sense to have names and identities. If we have like a river, the Thimphu River, for instance, you know, is there such a thing as a Thimphu River? What exactly is the Thimphu River? If you say, oh, you look at that's the Thimphu River, well, you know, before very long that water is going to be flowing into the sea, so it's no longer the Thimphu River. So where exactly is it? So does that mean there's no Thimphu River? Well, of course there is. There's a conventional designation of that body of water flowing along as Thimphu River, but there's no such fixed entity called Thimphu River. There is the water and the stones and the fish, and they're all together, just for the sake of convenience and communication, we refer to as Thimphu River. And it's the same with our self. And so we can use this word self in certain circumstances in a conventional sense. Yeah. So, you know, if you know, we say, look, you're on your own now, you've got to do this yourself. You know, does that mean if we're a Buddhist we can't say that? No, because we're speaking on the conventional plane. You know, right now, this work, you know, I can't do this for you, it's your job. You know, you're being paid to do this, you do it yourself. I'm the boss, I'm not going to do that, it's your job, do it yourself. So we can use the word self, but without sort of betraying underlying Buddhist teachings and Buddhist philosophy, because we know we're using it in a particular constrained way that we both understand. And so the Buddha, you know, in his discourses spoke on many different levels and planes depending on who he was talking to. And the Dhammapada is a miscellany of verses gleaned from many different places, many different discourses to many different people over 45 years. And so in some verses he'll be speaking on a very high plane and some verses on the conventional plane. So when he says the self is the refuge of the self, it means if you've got greed in your heart, nobody's going to take it away from you. No guru can take the greed out of your heart, no deity, no prayer can do it. It has to be dealt with by yourself and your own efforts. So that's not denying principles of anicca and dukkha and anatta and sunyata and all these things, but it's a one way of talking that we both understand what we mean by that. I just want one more point about this, that one Buddhist author made a very good point. He's saying the extent to which we are deceived by our language and the conventions of language into assuming that there are independent entities themselves. Because like English language is basically you have a subject, a verb and an object. And so we perceive the world through that framework. And so he has a wonderful example. He said, let's take the simple phrase, it is raining. And he said, what does the word it refer to? What is the it which is raining? There isn't something, a subject which is raining, there's just rain. Yeah? And so the Buddha is saying, who is the owner of the body? Who is the owner of feelings? Who is the owner of perceptions and thoughts and emotions and sense consciousness? The Buddha says, if you look very clearly, you can't find this owner. There's just a stream, the flow of phenomena. And just as there's no it which is raining, there is no me, which is this body or these feelings. There's just this flow. But that's a level, kind of profound level. In just normal discourse, we can't be talking on that level all the time. So we use these more conventional terms.